Eight is Enough arrived in 1977 with a single premise: one father, 8 children, one house. What unfolded across 5 seasons, on screen and off it, turned out to be far more complicated than anyone involved was prepared for. He was not the original Tom Bradford. ABC executive Fred Silverman watched a single day of footage with a different actor playing the Bradford patriarch and immediately ended the arrangement, hiring Dick Van Patten instead because he made him laugh. Van Patten was 48 when the show premiered, already a veteran of 27 Broadway productions before his 18th birthday and a television presence going back to the family drama Mama in 1949. As Tom Bradford, the widowed newspaper columnist holding 8 children together in Sacramento, he brought a warmth that never tipped into performance. His own marriage to Patricia Poole, a former June Taylor dancer, ran for 61 years until his death in 2015, and his 3 sons all moved into entertainment, including Vincent Van Patten as a professional tennis player and World Poker Tour commentator. His family connections extended further than most viewers knew. He was the brother-in-law of Oscar winner Martin Balsam, and his niece Talia Balsam became George Clooney's first wife. Off-screen, he co-founded Natural Balance Pet Foods in 1989 and turned it into a major commercial enterprise. A diabetic stroke in 2006 slowed him briefly before a solid recovery. He died in June 2015 at 86. The woman who arrived to play his second wife brought with her a Tony Award. The Bradford living room was somewhat too small to hold. The casting of Betty Buckley as Abby Bradford required her to step into a show already in motion. Diana Hyland, who had played the original Mother Joan, died of cancer in 1977 before the second season began, and Buckley, then 30, arrived into a home that wasn't yet sure it wanted her. One of the Bradford children's first lines to her character cut to the situation plainly: "I just want you to know I'm older than you are." She fought the writers to keep Abby from becoming a passive housewife, insisting on storylines that recognized her PhD candidacy and career ambitions on screen. Her marriage to director Peter Flood ended in 1979 while the show was still running, and she has remained unmarried since, living on a Texas ranch where she competes professionally in cutting horse events at a National Cutting Horse Association level. After 8 is Enough, she won a Tony for Grizabella in the original Broadway Cats in 1983, introducing memory to the world, then spent subsequent decades seeking darker material, including M. Night Shyamalan's Split in 2016. She has no children. Now 78, she is performing a concert residency at Joe's Pub in New York and has a role in Aaron Sorkin's The Social Reckoning, releasing later in 2026. The youngest cast member arrived in the show's final season and spent the following years becoming far more famous than the role suggested. Ralph Macchio joined 8 is Enough in its final season as Jeremy Andretti, Abby Bradford's orphan nephew, deployed by the network at 19 as a leather-jacketed teen heartthrob intended to hold the show's younger viewership through its last year. He had been with Phyllis Fierro, a nurse practitioner, since meeting her at a Sweet 16 party when he was 15. They married in 1987, a relationship now spanning nearly 40 years and 2 children. The Karate Kid in 1984 made him a generational icon, and the image it produced proved exceptionally difficult to move beyond, following him through the decades in ways that narrowed casting conversations and at points frustrated him. His resolution was not to escape the character, but to return to him on his own terms. Cobra Kai, the Netflix continuation launched in 2018, gave him a second wave of cultural relevance, with an entirely new generation of viewers, sustaining something his 1980s stardom had never quite managed across the intervening years. Now 64, his arc remains one of the more complete recoveries of identity in the cast's longer story. The actress, who had been a Bradford series regular since the very first episode, was carrying something quietly through those 5 seasons that would only become clear to the public much later. The woman who played Mary Bradford, the most intellectually driven and level-headed of the Bradford daughters, was managing something invisible throughout every season she appeared. Lonnie O'Grady had been living with severe panic disorder since she was 18, and the medical response in the 1970s was to prescribe tranquilizers in combinations that generated a dependency far outlasting the original condition. She was 22 when 8 is Enough began, born Lanita Rose O'Grady into a family the industry already knew. Her mother, Mary Grady, was among Hollywood's most influential child talent agents, and her brother Don Grady had played Robbie Douglas on My Three Sons, making the screen a family business before she chose it herself. She married 3 times across the late 1970s, each briefly and all in divorce, and had no children. The panic attacks grew severe enough to produce agoraphobia, making it genuinely difficult to leave her dressing room between scenes on difficult days. After the show, she became a talent agent following her mother's path and worked for a period as a recovery counselor. In 1998, during a detox admission at Cedars-Sinai, she alleged she was sexually assaulted by a hospital technician and filed suit. The case remained pending at her death. She died on September 25, 2001, 1 week before her 47th birthday, the coroner ruling multiple drug intoxication. Whether it was accidental was never determined. Adam Rich was 8 years old when 8 is Enough began, spending the most formative years of his childhood as Nicholas Bradford, America's little brother, his page boy haircut so iconic that parents were walking sons into barbers and requesting the look by character name. In 1991, when Rich was arrested for smashing a pharmacy window to steal drugs, his TV father Dick Van Patten arrived personally to post bail, a gesture that spoke to a bond that outlasted the show by decades. Rich remained close to Van Patten until his death in 2015. The path from beloved child star to functioning adult had not been easy. By the late 1980s, he had stepped away from acting, finding the transition to ordinary life difficult after years of constant recognition. He never married and had no children. A 1996 magazine piece publishing a fake story claiming he had been murdered, intended as satire about celebrity obsession, caused confusion he spent years explaining. He died on January 7, 2023, at 54 in his Los Angeles home, the cause confirmed as accidental fentanyl toxicity. He would have been 57 in 2026. The actress who played his nearest on-screen sister was one of the only members of the main cast who was actually a teenager during production. She started the series as Connie Newton and ended it as Connie Needham, having married David Needham, a set designer on the production, in 1979 while filming was still ongoing. As Elizabeth Bradford, the outgoing, telephone-obsessed daughter she played across all 112 episodes of 8 is Enough, she was 17 when production began, one of the few cast members actually close to her character's age. Her background before Hollywood had been serious ballet training, a discipline that would eventually shape the direction her life took. She and David Needham had 2 daughters, Kimberly and Taylor, before divorcing in 2005. In 2009, she received an ovarian cancer diagnosis and underwent surgery and chemotherapy, a battle she later discussed openly in the context of women's health awareness. She recovered fully. The second career she built drew directly on her earliest training. For many years, she taught jazz and lyrical dance to young students in Orange County, a quiet reinvention completely unknown to most of the audience who remembered her as the Bradford girl perpetually on the phone. By 2026, she has stepped back from teaching as well, living in Southern California, appearing occasionally at nostalgia events but maintaining a life at a considered distance from the show's orbit. 17 years old and already appearing in teen magazines when 8 is Enough premiered, Willie Ames played Tommy Bradford, the show's rock-loving heartthrob, and by his own admission, arrived on set not always ready to work. He showed up late, occasionally hungover, the beginning of something he hadn't yet named. Charles in Charge followed the show, and Buddy Lembeck opposite Scott Baio maintained his visibility through the mid-1980s. Then the structure gave way. 2 marriages ended in divorce. Alcohol and drug dependency deepened. By 2008, he had filed for bankruptcy, lost his house and possessions, and held a public garage sale of his own memorabilia to cover expenses. He admitted in a later interview to holding a knife to his own throat in his lowest moment. Dick Van Patten, his TV father, remained a genuine support across that period, a professional model whose consistency Ames never forgot even when he couldn't match it. Between careers, he earned a 6-star cruise director's certificate, a senior maritime industry qualification, working his way up from the bottom. He married Winnie Hung in 2014 and describes her as his anchor. Now 65, he works as a director and producer for Hallmark and Great American Family Productions. The actress who follows him was the quietest of the Bradford children. Diane Kay played Nancy Bradford, the slightly vain but warm-hearted daughter whose vanity the show's writers mined for gentle comedy. Across all 5 seasons of 8 is Enough, she was 23 when filming began and playing younger. A parallel Spielberg connection ran alongside the Bradford years. She was one of the last Universal Studios stock players. She appeared in Spielberg's 1941 and 1979, with her casting in 8 is Enough turning from a temporary holding pattern into a 5-year run. She married businessman Fred Silvers in the early 1980s and built a domestic life that placed stability ahead of further stardom, raising one son and withdrawing gradually from the industry through the 1990s. Her last significant credit was a guest appearance in Diagnosis Murder in 1999, after which she chose full retirement, a decision that separates her from nearly every other Bradford sibling's trajectory. She remained close to Grant Goodeve and Connie Needham long after filming ended. Reports of health difficulties in the mid-2000s were never publicly addressed. Now 72, she lives in Los Angeles, having appeared at cast reunions in the late 2010s, but otherwise maintaining a quiet distance from public life. The pilot for 8 is Enough had already been filmed with a different actor in the role of David Bradford when Grant Goodeve got the call. Mark Hamill had taken the part, then stepped away to make a film called Star Wars, and Goodeve, 24 and largely unknown, inherited the eldest Bradford son for all 5 seasons that followed. He was given more than a role. When producers realized he could sing, they handed him the show's theme song beginning in season 3, and 8 is Enough became a minor chart entry as a result. He married Deborah Lynn Ketchum in 1978 at the height of his fame, and they remained together in 2026 after nearly 50 years. He has spoken about struggling with alcohol during those early celebrity years, crediting his faith and his marriage for an early, lasting sobriety that spared him the public spiraling seen elsewhere in the cast. After the show, he built a television life in the Pacific Northwest, hosting travel programs in Seattle for over 2 decades and becoming a local institution long after the Bradford years receded. Gamers know him as the voice of the engineer in Team Fortress 2 and Wolf in Star Fox 64, reaching audiences who have no memory of the Bradford house at all. He appeared in Twin Peaks: The Return in 2017 and remains the unofficial historian of the 8 is Enough cast, sharing memories and interviews with the warmth of someone who genuinely loved the experience. Pilot Joanne Bradford, 8 is Enough's theatrical dreamer who treated every domestic disagreement as an opportunity for performance, was played by Laurie Walters, who was already 30 when filming began in 1977, playing a character nearly a decade younger than herself. She was technically closer in age to the show's parents than its children, a running private joke on set that the performance quietly absorbed. She had appeared in The Herod Experiment alongside Don Johnson in 1973, a provocative drama considerably outside the Bradford family's temperature. She made a considered departure from screen work in the late 1990s, relocating to Ojai, California, and spending years as a program coordinator for the Tree People, an urban reforestation organization in Los Angeles, planting and maintaining urban forests as an active volunteer rather than a passive donor. She married actor John Slade in 1999, and they became creative partners as well as companions, directing theater together in Ojai until his death in 2017. In his memory, she dedicated a lending library at the Ojai Art Center in 2022, a permanent mark on the community she had spent decades building. She had no children. Now 79 and still directing local productions, she is as far from the Bradford dining table as geography and intention could take someone. Merle the Pearl Stockwell, the professional baseball player who married Susan Bradford in one of the show's highest-rated episodes, was played by Brian Patrick Clark, who had graduated from Yale University in 1974 before Hollywood had any idea he existed. He was 27 when he joined the cast in 1979, and his genuine athleticism was the principal reason he landed the role. The physical authority he projected was not performed. The on-screen chemistry with Susan Richardson was convincing enough that viewers frequently assumed a real relationship, though there was none. He married Olympic gymnast Kathy Johnson, a 1984 silver medalist, in 1995, and they have lived in Orlando, Florida for many years. His son Sean became a competitive pole vaulter, carrying the family's athletic thread into the next generation. After 8 is Enough, he played the darkly compelling villain Grant Putnam on General Hospital in the early 1980s, a deliberate move to demonstrate range beyond the charming jock he had been handed. He also appeared in the cult horror film Sleepaway Camp 2 and maintained a working television career well into the 2010s through Drop Dead Diva and One Tree Hill. His Ivy League background was something he rarely mentioned during the jock years, a detail that sits interestingly beside everything else. Now 73 and largely retired in Florida, he is among the less visible reunion figures. Janet MacArthur Bradford, the woman David married in 8 is Enough, and the first sign that the Bradford children were becoming adults with lives entirely beyond the family table, was played by Joan Prather, who holds what may be the most consequential off-screen introduction in Hollywood history. Prather was 27 when she joined the cast, already a working actress who had appeared alongside John Travolta in The Devil's Reign in 1975. She is reportedly the person who first introduced him to Scientology during that production, handing him the foundational text that initiated a decades-long involvement reshaping his entire public identity. Whether she understood what she had set in motion is not recorded. She married criminal defense attorney Douglas Fry and settled in Malibu, retreating from the entertainment world so completely that she has not appeared at a single 8 is Enough reunion and has not given an industry interview in decades. In September 2008, a single event broke the quiet. She was arrested in Malibu for felony hit and run after allegedly striking a police officer's arm while driving away from a traffic stop, released on $50,000 bail. Entertainment outlets covered it briefly. There were no lasting legal consequences, and she returned to privacy with what appears to be a complete absence of interest in public life. It remains the only interruption to an otherwise thoroughly self-contained 4 decades. Rapid-fire secretary Donna arrived in 8 is Enough in Season 3 and immediately changed the rhythm of the office scenes, and Jennifer Darling, who played her across 25 episodes, was given room to ad-lib and accelerate her dialogue because producers recognized that her natural delivery was faster and funnier than anything the script had planned for. She was 32 when she joined the show in 1978. Already familiar to science fiction audiences from recurring roles in The Bionic Woman and The $6 Million Man. Her marriage to actor James B. Sikking, best known as Lieutenant Hunter on Hill Street Blues, had ended in divorce. What she built after 8 is Enough was almost entirely invisible to the show's audience, and remarkable in its own right. A voice acting career spanning animation, anime, and video games that included Princess Ayeka in the long-running Tenchi Muyo series, Galadriel in the video game Middle-earth, Shadow of War, and additional voices across Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, and Spirited Away. The woman who had played a lightning-paced print media secretary became, in parallel industries, a figure revered by audiences who had never seen her face. Now 80 and living in Los Angeles, she appears at voice acting conventions where she is recognized not as Donna from the Sacramento Register, but as an entirely separate body of work most 8 is Enough viewers never knew she was building. Susan Bradford's wedding to Merle Stockwell was one of the most watched television moments of 1979, and Susan Richardson, playing the radiant bride at 27, had her real pregnancy written directly into the storyline because production could see what was happening and chose to incorporate it. Her daughter Sarah was born in 1980. The marriage to Michael Vreeland that produced that pregnancy ended bitterly. The warmth of the wedding episode and the life that followed it moved in entirely opposite directions. She later described beginning to use cocaine during the production under pressure to return to her pre-pregnancy figure quickly, a pattern that deepened after filming ended and narrowed her professional options until they effectively disappeared. She was the first cast member to speak publicly about marijuana use being common in the trailers between scenes, a disclosure that reframed the show's wholesome surface for many of its long-term viewers. By the late 1980s, she had left the industry and was working as a janitor and a caregiver. In 2013, she gave an interview describing her teeth falling out from a digestive illness and her living conditions in a deteriorating trailer, a portrait of circumstances that genuinely shocked those who remembered her in that white dress. Now 74 and living in Pennsylvania, she requires full-time care and does not attend reunions. Former castmates speak of her with a tenderness that says more than any factual account can carry. Elliot Randolph, the exacting editor-in-chief introduced in 8 is Enough's final season as the new pressure point in Tom Bradford's professional life, was played by James Karen, who arrived on set at 57 with a career stretching from the original Broadway production of A Streetcar Named Desire to over 2 decades of Pathmark supermarket commercials that had made his face more recognizable to New York and New Jersey grocery shoppers than any role he had played on film. Born Jacob Krinsky to Jewish immigrant parents in Pennsylvania, he had worked consistently and prolifically across his entire adult life. Poltergeist in 1982, Return of the Living Dead in 1985, The Pursuit of Happiness in 2006, and over 200 screen credits accumulating across 7 decades without interruption. The detail that follows him through remembrances by those who knew him, however, belongs to a different story entirely. He was a close friend of Buster Keaton in the comedian's final years, lived with Keaton and his wife Eleanor for a period, helped care for him as his health declined, and afterward co-founded the International Buster Keaton Society as a permanent act of devotion to the friendship. He married actress Alba Francesca in 1986, and they remained together for 32 years until his death in 2018 at 94. He was still working when he died. Before television had established itself as the industry's center, Virginia Vincent was playing everything from damsels to hard-boiled detectives in New York radio drama, her vocal range doing work that the screen would eventually find other uses for. She was 59 when 8 is Enough began, playing Daisy Maxwell, the warm-hearted neighbor and wife of the Bradford family physician, and brought to the role a professional history that included a major part in the 1958 film noir I Want to Live, and guest appearances across The Andy Griffith Show, Perry Mason, and The Untouchables. She had been married twice, the second marriage ending with her husband's death in 1959, and shared a brief romantic connection with actor Jack Klugman in the early 1960s, before settling into the long, solitary chapter of her later years. The easy domestic banter she developed with Michael Toma across their shared scenes, the shorthand of a couple who seemed to have been married before the story began, was built from professional trust rather than extended contact, a handful of episodes per season being enough for 2 experienced actors to find the rhythm. She retired from the screen in the early 1990s, turned to painting, and supported local theater charities, and spoke candidly in her later years about how the industry's indifference to older actresses had made that departure more practical than voluntary. She died in San Diego on October 3, 2013, at 95. Of everyone connected to 8 is Enough, she had the longest life, arrived the most experienced, and left, in the end, the last. The Bradford table had room for everyone. Which of these real lives hit you hardest? Subscribe to Classic Hollywood Echoes.